Hiya, I'm Lilly Fletcher and I work within the creative team up at the Innovation Hub, and today I'd love to take you through step by step how to colour in one of your tattered lace die cuts using your amazing Ink Lily pens. So all I've done is I've taken one of my tattered lace dies and I've just cut it out. What I've cut it out with is some white super smooth cardstock, and I've chosen a 350 GSM. And you can see that I've chosen this gorgeous die which has got lots of leafy detail in there. We've got some orchids. There's also a separate little leaf that goes with it that you could use as an extra embellishment when you're building up your cards. So all I'm going to do to start with is I'm just going to take a black fine liner pen. Now this is a 005 black fine liner pen, which means that it's a 0.2mm line, and that's going to allow us to get into these cut lines within the die cut. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pen and I'm simply going to follow the cut lines that are within that die cut. So what this is going to allow us to do is when we come to actually colour in the image, we'll be able to see really easily the boundaries of the different parts of the image. So for example, where one leaf stops and another one begins, or where the flowers are positioned within the die cut. And it will also enable us to really pick out that detail. It'll give us a really beautiful finishing touch to our colouring. So I'm just following those cut lines that are within the die cut. So with tattered lace dies, you tend to get a lot of these cut lines as well as the outer cutting edge, and it just adds a lot of detail and interest to the die. So I'm just allowing my pen to follow those cut lines. It's really not difficult at all, because once your pen is within that cut line, it will just glide along, and it's quite difficult to actually go outside the lines. So all I do is I continue to do this for every cut line within this die cut, just going around in a logical and methodical way. So starting with one leaf in one section and just moving around, and I would do that for the whole die cut and also the separate little leaf. And what that would give me is something a little bit like this. So you can see here, I've just filled in all of those cut lines, so we can now see a lot of the detail of the die cut a lot better. So what we're going to move on to doing now is the actual really fun part, which is the actual colouring. So I am using, as I mentioned earlier, my Ink Lily pens. Now these are amazing. They are double-ended pens, so on one end you've got a fine brush nib, and that's a rubber polymer brush nib. So it ends in a really fine point, which is going to allow us to get lots of fine detail, which is really important when we've got a really intricate and detailed die cut like this. In addition to the brush nib, we've also got a broader chisel nib, and there's lots of different techniques you can do with the chisel nib. I'm not going to focus on those so much today, but one of the things you can do is edge your cardstock with your chisel nib, and that's an absolutely fantastic use. They are alcohol-based markers, so what you'll find is that they blend really easily, and that is to do with not only the quality of the ink within the barrel, but also the quality of that brush nib. It's the correct density for the flow of ink through that barrel and through the nib, so you're not going to get pooling of ink onto your page. So I'm going to colour in the different leaves, and I'm going to use different tones of green. So every leaf's not going to be the same tone, because that'd be slightly boring and it would maybe all blend into each other. So I'm going to focus on sort of a group of leaves at a time, and I'm going to start with this, I'd probably call it the main leaf on there, and I'm going to do it in green tones, and I'm going to start off with my palest green tone, which is 171. Now I'm using my brush nib, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an even coat of colour all over this leaf. So just to give us a base colour. And now I'm working from light to dark, and that is probably the best way generally to work, because you'll find that you're sort of working with wet into wet, so you'll find blending a lot easier. It almost will blend by itself, which is really, really exciting, because it makes our colouring process really easy, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. So I'm using small circles to fill in this area. Although it is a fairly small area, there's quite a lot of detail within there. I'm not struggling at all. I'm not going outside of the lines because of that really fine brush nib. Now what you'd find with brush nibs that are not rubber polymer, so more fibrous ones, is although when you first purchase the pens it will probably end in a really fine point and you'll probably be able to get that detail to start with. But what you'll find is as you use them, that nib will fray and you'll lose that really fine point. Whereas with these Ink Lilly pens, because we've got a rubber polymer brush nib, it keeps its shape, it doesn't fray, and you'll get that fine detail, that fine point every time you colour. Now I've used these pens a lot already and you can see that nib is still absolutely perfect, which is just brilliant. So that's my 171. I've done my coat all over that leaf. I'm going to go in with a darker colour now, which is my 228. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the centre of the leaf and I'm going to go outwards. So we're going to have darker at the centre of the leaves, and as we go out to the edge it's going to be lighter. And I'm going to use the brush nib to do a flicking technique. So starting from the centre and just flicking outwards, and it's really, really simple. I must say I have tried to do this technique with a bullet nib and it doesn't work as well. It really doesn't. So this brush nib is absolutely fantastic. And always remember to rotate your die cut rather than trying to bend your wrist in a way that might be quite uncomfortable. And we're following those cut lines. So when we filled in those cut lines earlier with our fine liner pen, we've made our life a lot easier because where the cut lines are, it's going to be darker. So it's giving us a sort of idea of where to add our shading. So I'm just following those cut lines, just flicking outwards, just like so. And you can see we've already got a bit of depth and dimension onto there. I'm going to go in with a darker colour still, which is our 230. And that's the darkest green I'm going to have on this particular leaf. And again, I'm going to start in the centre. I'm just going to flick out. Now, this might look a little harsh to start with. Don't worry, we will blend it out. So just like so. And then I'm going to go back to a lighter green, which is my 228. Again, using my brush nib, just flicking to blend that colour through and drag that darker green out. So we've not got a harsh line. We've got that blended sort of ombre effect, giving us texture and shade to this leaf. Now that looks lovely, but I want to give it sort of another element, another bit of depth to it. So I'm actually going to go in with 164, which is a yellow. Now the brilliant thing about Ink Lilly pens is because of the quality of ink within that barrel, not only can we add colour, we can also remove colour, which is absolutely brilliant because it means we can't really make mistakes, which is always a good thing. So I'm going to go in with my yellow and I want to make the tips of the leaves slightly yellow. So I'm just going to be quite delicate. I'm not adding a lot of colour. I just want that sort of touch, that blush of yellow to the edges. Maybe the leaves are turning slightly, they're slightly past their best. And I'm just going to add just to the very tips, very lightly using that brush nib, adding that little bit of yellow into there. Sort of another depth, another element to that leaf. And that would be that leaf finished. Now what I would do is I'd go in and repeat that for a few more of the leaves within the image. So we've got a balance of this shade of green throughout the whole image. So we've not got it all on one side, it's dispersed quite evenly throughout the die cut, which flows really nicely. We're going to go on to another sort of set of leaves now, another collection. So I'm going to go for slightly more browny colours. And I'm going to start by focusing on this little leaf. And I'm going to go again with my palest green, which this time is 220. And like I did before, I'm just going to go in using small circles with my brush nib to fill in all over that leaf. Now you'll notice that I'm working onto my glass mat, yes, but I've also got a piece of cardstock over the top, sort of to protect my surface, but it's always a good idea to have a piece of cardstock underneath what you're colouring. Now, ink lily pens, what you'll find with them is that when you lay down colour, it will not bleed outwards. That is to do with the quality of the brush nib and the density of that nib. You don't get ink flowing out too quickly. However, as with all alcohol pens, you will to some extent, as you can see here, get some movement of ink through the cardstock to the other side, and that's completely normal. So by having a piece of card underneath, it just protects any ink that will move through. But what you'll find with ink lily pens is that you get less movement through the card to the other side than you might with other alcohol-based pens, but you'll never get that bleeding outwards. Okay, so I've got my base colour there. I'm going to go in with a slightly darker green, which is our 42. And again, I'm going to think that it's going to be slightly darker in the centre of the leaf, where it's sort of more pinched in, and as we go out to the edge, it'll be slightly paler. So I'm adding more of this colour, this darker colour, to the centre, again following those cut lines and just flicking out very gently really. I'm not having to press down hard or anything like that. Then going back to the paler green and just blending that through so we get more of a smooth transition. And then I'm going to go to my darkest green within this blend, which is 224. Again using my brush nib, and I'm just going to add that gently to the very centre of the leaf, just like so. Again, taking note of where those cut lines are. And that would be that particular leaf finish. So we've got a different tone of green into there, just mixing it up a bit, making our finished image a bit more interesting. And I would repeat that with a few more of the little leaves within the image, and that's the stage we will be at now. Now I want to focus on more of the sort of spiky leaves that we've got within the image, and I'm actually only going to use a 2-pen blend for those. So you don't always have to use 3 pens. It's not all about a 3-pen blend. If I've got a larger area, sometimes I might even go up to 5 different tones within that blend. It's very much sort of playing it by ear, looking at how big your area is, looking at what different colours you want to use. So it's not all about a 3-pen blend. And I'm going to start with number 47, brush nib once again. I'm going to focus on this leaf here. So this is my paler colour. And again, I'm going to use my small circles to fill in the area. Now I did mention earlier that the cardstock I was using was super smooth 350 GSM. Now it's absolutely crucial when you're working with your alcohol-based markers like your ink lily pens that you use a super smooth cardstock. What you'll find is it allows your colours to blend really easily, and it's a nice smooth surface to enable you to do that. What I would say is don't go for pro paper. It holds the pixels of colour really tightly, which is great when you're printing off from your USBs and CD-ROMs, but when you're using your alcohol pens, you'll find it very difficult to move the colour and get a smooth blend. I would also recommend a heavier weight cardstock, so I'd say anything between a 250 and 350 GSM. I've chosen 350 because you'll find when you use a thicker card, you do get better results, but the fact that it's super smooth is the really crucial point. So I'm going to go in with my darker green now of the 2 that I'm using at the moment, which is 43. Once again, using the brush nib. And I'm going to start at the base and I'm going to work out to the edges. So again, darker at the bottom here, just like so, and then I'm going to flick outwards. So it's almost fan shaped, this leaf. So imagine it being more pinched in at the bottom, darker, more shadow there, and then flicking out towards the edges where it's going to be a little bit paler. So this is really easy. I'm only using 2 pens. It's really simple to create this effect, but it looks really lovely. It's so simple to do. I think when you colour your own die cuts, you can choose whatever colour you like. So maybe you want these in blues or pinks. It's totally up to you. If you're sending a card to a relative whose favourite colour is orange, why not do them in orange? The choice is absolutely yours, and that's the joy with colouring in your own die cuts. The power's in your hands and you can do whatever you like. And for me, that's really exciting. It's being truly creative and you're truly being the designer, which is just brilliant. So that's that leaf finished, and I'd repeat that for the other leaves of that style. And what that would give me is something a little bit like that. So you can see now that I've actually done all the leaves within this image. The only part left to do are the flowers. Now, I took these to be orchids. When you colour in your own die cuts, you can choose whatever colours you like, you can make them whatever flowers you like. They don't have to be realistic, they can be fancy flowers, you can do them in rainbow colours, it's totally up to you. But I was thinking orchids for this. Now you can get more pale, muted colours of orchids, maybe creams, but I thought if I was to colour them in cream, they'd get a little bit lost within these brighter leaves. And I wanted sort of more of a vibrant, almost tropical feel to this bit of colouring. So I was thinking pink would be really nice. I would say these are the focal point of this die cut. So we do want them to stand out, but also we don't want them to stand out too much that it completely overpowers the leaves and all you see is the flowers. We want the eye to be drawn around the whole image. And I'm going to show you a little way in which to do that. So I'm working with pinks. My first pink I'm going to take is my palest, and it's number 8. I'm just going to focus on this orchid here. So using the same technique that we've used for every other part of the image, using our small circles to fill in that area. So I'm actually going to go all over here with my number 8, just like so. So it's quite a small area, but again, I'm not worrying about that because I've got my brush nib. I know that I can get into that fine detail and I'm not going to colour over the lines. And if you do a little bit, it's okay. You know, there's ways around that, so it's absolutely fine. I'm going to go in now with 198, which is slightly darker. So I'm imagining the centre is going to be a little bit darker than the edges. And again, I'm just going to flick outwards, adding in a little bit of depth and dimension to this flower. And then I'm going to go back to number 8, and I'm just going to blend that through, just to take that harsh edge off it, so we've got more of a smooth gradation of colour. Then I'm going to go to my darkest pink, which is a number 84. I'm going to add the very darkest bits to the very centre of this orchid, just to give me a little bit of depth, like so. Now I'm going to go into the centre, and what you'll find if you look at images of orchids, which is what I did when I was thinking about colouring this first time round, I had a little look on the internet on a search engine, looking at pictures of orchids for a bit of inspiration. And the pink ones tend to have more of a yellowy centre. So I'm taking number 45 and I'm just gently going to add it to the centre, just like so, just to give it that little blush of yellow. Now that looks really nice and I'm quite pleased with that, but I feel it's almost too bright. It's distracting from the leaves a little bit too much, and I think we want to knock it back a bit. And a really cool technique you can do with your ink lily pens is adding either a warm or a cool, depending on the colours that you've used underneath, grey over the top of your colours to just knock them back a little bit. So I've taken WG1, which is a warm grey, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to be quite gentle. I'm just going to add a little bit of this warm grey into the pink. Now that seems quite a strange thing to do, to have pink and add grey over the top, but don't forget alcohol pens don't mix, so we're not going to get a muddy colour. This is literally just going to knock back that brightness a little bit, and so it's not so fluorescent, so it blends in nicely. It's still the focal point of the image, these flowers, but it's not very, very, instantly obvious that it stands out. So I'd repeat that process for all of the other flowers within the image. That would give me something a little bit like this, and all I've done to finish it off is I've just taken that exact same warm grey one using the brush nib once again, and I've just gone around the inside there. Now it gives me a little bit of shadow. It brings the warm grey that I've added to the flowers into the centre, so it draws your eye round the image really nicely. And that would be my finished colouring on this die cut. So as you can see, it's really easy to colour in your own die cuts. It's great fun too. You've got complete freedom. You can choose whatever colours you like depending on your recipient, depending on the feel of the project, which is just brilliant. And I really hope you're going to have a go at it yourself, and I can't wait to see what you create when you start colouring in your own die cuts with your amazing Ink Lily pens.